When we talk about sacrifices and attacks, the name of players like Mikhail Tal probably comes to mind. But in the words of Garry Kasparov himself, Tigran Petrosian carried out attacks and sacrifices that were more precise. And to do so, the 9th world champion followed his 5 golden rules, which we are going to break down in this instructive video. We are in the 1966 World Championship. The challenger, 29-year-old Boris Spassky, begins the game with 1d4. On the other side of the board, the defending champion, 37-year-old Tigran Petrosian, replies with knight f6. The game continues with knight f3, e6, and bishop g5, setting up a Tory attack. And what is this Tory attack? It is essentially the same as the London system, but with the bishop placed on g5 instead of f4. Petrosian responds in the center with d5. Since the bishop has already developed, Spassky closes the pawn chain with e3. The bishop breaks the pin with bishop e7. Both knights are developed to d2 and d7. The development continues with bishop to d3, and the center is struck with c5, after which white reinforces it with c3. Black continues with b6, while Spassky castles. The bishop develops to b7, and white proceeds with the thematic move knight e5, aiming to follow up with f4 on the next move. The idea is that if the knights are exchanged, white will recapture with the f-pawn, opening the file in his favor for the attack. But Petrosian anticipates all of this and immediately trades the knights, forcing Spassky to recapture with the d-pawn. Now the knight on f6 is under attack, so it retreats to d7, putting pressure back on the e5 pawn. At this point, Spassky should exchange bishops and play f4 to defend his pawn on the 5th rank with another pawn. But instead, he decides to defend it with a piece and retreats his bishop to f4. After this bishop to f4 move, the position that has emerged is a well-known chess structure called a pawn on the 5th rank defended by a piece. This setup has both a positive and a negative side. The positive aspect for white is that the pawn on e5 restricts the f6 square, preventing black's knight from occupying its natural defensive post. If Petrosian castles short, they will find themselves without their main defender on the king side, which could become dangerous. However, this is where white's conceptual mistake lies. Petrosian has not castled yet, and when he does, he will castle long. In this way, the downside of white's structure becomes clear. The e5 pawn will become a constant target of attack, tying down pieces to its defense. A strategic mistake that black will exploit with precision. If anyone wants to understand the true strength of a world champion, here is a perfect example. After this small mistake by Spassky, Petrosian seizes the opportunity and will not give him a single breath until checkmate is delivered. The game continues with queen c7, preparing long castling and targeting the weak e5 pawn. The only move to defend it is knight f3. After this, Petrosian plays h6. His idea will soon become clear. Spassky, sensing that black is about to castle long, starts trying to open lines on the queen side by sacrificing a pawn with b4. But black does not get sidetracked by grabbing pawns. Instead, he pushes the pawn to g5. Now the battle is taking place on both the queen side and the king side. This leads us to the first rule that defines Petrosian's style: strategy across the whole board. The bishop must retreat to g3, and the pawn storm against the white king continues with h5. The threat is clear. Black wants to push h4 and trap the bishop. To prevent this, white plays h4, but Petrosian happily captures the pawn, opening the g-file for the attack. White, unwilling to lose the crucial central pawn on e5, declines to capture on h4, and instead plays bishop to f4, maintaining the defense. After this, black finally castles long. The best move for Spassky would have been to immediately exchange on c5, opening lines for the attack. However, instead, White impulsively plays a4, which turns out to be a serious strategic mistake. After this, Petrosian continues with c4, shutting down the c file. The threatened bishop retreats to e2. Now we have reached one of the critical moments of the game. But before we continue, let me ask you a question. How would you play this position as black? Pause the video and take your time to think it through. The most natural move might be to go straight for the attack with rook g8, but this move is not entirely correct. Why? Because it would allow White to play b5, followed by a5, launching a counterattack on the queen side. And this is exactly where we see Petrosian's brilliance and his second rule, restrict your opponent's possibilities. That is why he plays the magnificent prophylactic move a6. 2 exclamation marks for this move. The idea behind this move is clear. If Spassky plays b5, Black will immediately respond with a5, completely locking down the queen side. If instead White tries a5 first, Petrosian will seal the position with b5, ensuring that there is no counterplay on that side of the board and that all the action will unfold on the king side. As Bobby Fischer himself once said, it doesn't matter how deep you calculate, Petrosian will smell any kind of danger 20 moves ahead. Spassky realizes that his attack has been neutralized and that danger is now looming over his own king. That is why he moves the king to h1. Only then does Petrosian bring his rook to g8, and here we see his third rule, lay siege to the enemy king. White continues preparing the defense with rook g1, while Petrosian plans to double his rooks on the g file, starting with rook g4. The queen develops to d2, and the maneuver is completed with rook g8. Meanwhile, Spassky finalizes his development with rook d1. Petrosian continues with his prophylactic attacking moves and retreats his bishop to f8. The idea is to strike with f6. If Spassky captures, the bishop will no longer be on e7, allowing Black to follow up with e5, gaining absolute control of the center. In an attempt to generate activity, White plays knight h2, attacking the rook on g4. But Petrosian was famous not only for his deep positional understanding, but also for his brilliant exchange sacrifices. Instead of retreating the attacked rook, he captures the e5 pawn. White accepts the challenge and captures the rook with knight takes g4. Black responds with h takes g4. Spassky attempts to counterattack by setting a small trap with e4. The idea is that if Black captures the pawn, he can continue with bishop takes e5, followed by queen takes e5, and then queen d8 checkmate. But of course, Petrosian is not going to fall for this trap, and calmly moves his bishop to d6. The game continues with queen e3, aiming to penetrate along this diagonal, but Petrosian prevents it by retreating the knight to d7. The bishops are exchanged, and Black recaptures with the queen. At this point, Spassky was probably out of ideas and without a clear plan, so he plays rook to d4 in error. This move accelerates Black's attack with e5, forcing the rook to retreat to d2. The relentless attack continues with f5. After this move, Tal remarked, "I do not know if telepathy exists, but that afternoon, the players seemed to perform like artists, bringing the audience's wishes to life." If White tries to capture with e takes f5, Black would respond with h3, creating serious threats. If at any moment the a8 h1 diagonal opens, Petrosian could immediately win with d4. In a desperate attempt, Spassky takes on d5, but Petrosian calmly responds with f4. A rare and picturesque position has now appeared on the board. Black has built a pawn phalanx in true Philidor style. White could try queen a7, but this move is harmless as it delivers no checks and creates no real threats. For this reason, Spassky instead decides to bring his queen to e4. After this, the knight joins the attack with knight f6, gaining tempo against the queen. White delivers a harmless check on f5, the king retreats to b8, and white tries to keep the diagonal closed with f3. But this does not concern Petrosian, who simply shifts his bishop's diagonal with bishop c8, driving the queen away from f5. Spassky retreats the queen to b1, and black continues with g3, closing in on the final blow. And in this position, we can clearly see Petrosian's fourth rule, the gradual tightening of the net. The king's decapitation is near. The breakthrough on the h-file will be devastating. That is why Spassky tries to prevent it with rook e1, planning that when black breaks through with h3, he can retreat his bishop to f1. However, Petrosian shows no mercy. He plays rook h8, threatening multiple dangerous continuations, including capturing on g2 with a double check, which would be lethal for white. With few options left, Spassky decides to capture on h3, after which Petrosian recaptures. Now, in desperation, white moves the king to g1. Black, with surgical precision, captures on f1, and the king recaptures, trying to escape through e2. The attack continues mercilessly. Petrosian plays e4, aiming for a devastating idea. If Spassky captures, black will follow up with f3, completely trapping the king and threatening mate on h1. For this reason, instead of capturing, white plays queen d1, reinforcing the defense of f3. If we want beautiful sacrifices in our own games, we first need to play well strategically. If you look closely, Petrosian has played on both sides of the board. He has neutralized his opponent's threats, launched an attack on the king, and tightened the net gradually. In other words, he has outplayed Spassky strategically. And now, at this very moment, he finishes the game with a brilliant sacrifice, knight to g4. After this violent sacrifice, checkmate is just around the corner. As one chess coach once said, if Petrosian sacrifices a piece, turn off the lights and pack up, because he never sacrificed in vain. White captures the knight with f takes g4, but black follows up with f3. Now the mating net is inevitable. Despite being down a full rook, Petrosian has completely trapped the king. An immediate mate on h1 is threatened. If white tries to escape with king g1, black simply responds with queen h6, coordinating with the rook to deliver checkmate on h1. With no way out, Spassky resigns. In my opinion, this is a strategic masterpiece, an artful display of eliminating the opponent's options, and an impeccable demonstration of attacking play by Petrosian. I hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video.